Today, on SteamPunk Minecraft, I built this awesome starter workshop, a place with all the necessary tools to build this steampunk world. But danger lurks nearby. Join me as I gear up to defend against dangerous enemies, sketchy villager tribes, and a bunch of other nonsense that could get in my way. This is episode 2 of SteamPunk Minecraft. You want to play mod packs with friends, but you can't seem to find a good server. And the free ones? With the big mod packs these days, free servers are just too laggy. Luckily for you, there's BISECT hosting. They host my server, and with plenty of affordable options, they can host your server too. And the best part is, they support almost every mod pack. Use code Doublesal at checkout for 25% off your first order. BISECT hosting, a great site for great servers. Welcome back to the SteamPunk series. The first task at hand is to finish this mine. I'm gonna need a lot of resources in this video, so it's essential that we wrap this up and get this mine going. The mine is pretty much complete, and with that task out of the way, I can move on to some of the next important steps. The first one being crafting our first create items. Andesite alloys as well as andesite casings, two items which are fundamental to doing anything in the create mod. I also crafted some of the first machine parts, and then I went into the cave via our mine system. That's when I discovered a new block called Magnetite. It's a magnet, and this magnet has special uses, one of which is generating electricity. If you look at the diagram, you can see what's referred to as a generator coil. When the coil is surrounded by the magnets on all four sides, it begins to spin, producing electricity. It wouldn't be much of a steampunk world if we didn't harness the power of electricity, so I added some of that stuff to my inventory and kept going. But I don't want to get ahead of myself. Before we build any machines, we're first going to need a workshop, a place where we can craft more materials to make more contraptions. I laid down a cobblestone outline, then I put the project on hold because there was one contraption that I needed if I wanted to proceed. I needed a special cobblestone generator, but I didn't have the necessary parts to build one. But with the help of this small setup, I was able to start putting the pieces together. With the iron sheets, I began making some of our first machines like the mechanical saw, a block that can auto-mine trees for you if you know how to work it. I then went to the cave below and gathered some lava for the cobblestone generator. On the side of our future workshop, I placed the water, and then I made the classic rookie mistake of turning the lava into obsidian. Once I was able to work that out, I began setting up the create aspect of the generator, one that involved the use of drills. But before I powered it on, I began filling in the floor for the workshop. Once that task was finally wrapped up, I went to the backside of the workshop and started working on the mechanics for the drill. With some of the basic components that I had crafted earlier, I was able to get the rig up and running. You can never go wrong with a reliable water wheel. And finally, I had my first automated machine, an infinite cobblestone generator. But it could be a little bigger and make more cobblestone, so I decided to double its output by making 2 cobblestone generators side by side. Reason being was because I was going to need a lot of stone for this workshop. I wanted to base it off of the first house I had made, so this entire building was going to be made out of stone. I decided to leave it alone while it generated the cobblestone I needed. Meanwhile, I was drafting more plans for the next machine, one that was essential for building this structure. I wanted to smelt the stones and make them smooth without wasting any coal, so I decided to make a furnace that ran purely on lava. All you had to do was place an item in front of the flames and they would auto-smelt. And I'm so happy that this was actually implemented into Create, because if this wasn't there, then think about all the coal that I would have to waste. With the help of our furnace and our cobblestone generators, the building was finally taking shape. I descended from the staircase of the tower, went through the inside of the workshop because I wanted to see how the outside was looking, and I gotta say that the shape was perfect. It was everything I wanted it to be. But there was another material that was essential to move forward, that being kelp. So I took a boat, went out into the open ocean, and collected as much kelp as I could carry. Now the big question, why did I need kelp? Reason being, I needed it to make conveyor belts, and you can't do anything in Create unless you have a good supply of conveyor belts. You first have to put the kelp into a furnace and make it into dried kelp. With the dried kelp, you then arrange it in the following fashion and boom, you have conveyor belts. A crucial item that I was going to utilize later, but until then, it was time to add more machines to the workshop. Items like the mechanical mixer. But there was only one problem. When I hooked it up to the power source behind, it wasn't fast enough and the mixer didn't work. The gears needed to be spinning faster for the machine to work, which meant I needed a rotational speed controller, a block that adds extra speed to your machines. But crafting one was going to be quite the task, because there were a number of items that we first needed to create. But as complicated as it seemed, the first step was simple. I had to gather clay, and I had to gather sand. With the following items, I was going to make bricks as well as sandstone. When I combined them together, I made what was called kiln bricks. And and with the kiln bricks, you combined 8 of them into one big block, and together they would form this type of super furnace. To combine all 8 blocks, I needed a hammer, and with the tool, all I would have to do was right-click a corner and all the blocks would merge. I right-clicked the corner, and all of a sudden I was greeted with this new interface for smelting and mixing metals. The metal of the day was bronze, made by mixing copper and zinc. I took the bronze to the mechanical press and had it flattened into sheets. With the sheets, I crafted a brass hand, a part we needed for a much larger machine. I added a little to the workshop, and then I came across this tribe of villagers. But these guys were armed to the teeth, so you better think twice before you steal from them. The next step involved me going deep into the caves, and for that, I was gonna need an oxygen tank, and it was gonna be pretty easy to fill it up with air. All we had to do was continuously twist the top with the shaft. Somehow that would pump air into the tank, and it would fill up in the course of 15 minutes. For the tank to work, I needed a special copper helmet, one that would allow me to breathe the air. The tank was full of air, and the helmet was on. I was now ready to venture into the deepest, darkest caverns of this Minecraft world. I hadn't even stepped off my front porch when all of a sudden I was attacked by this giant spider. I entered the cave with my fingers crossed, hoping that the oxygen tank would do its thing. Thankfully, all was well, and I even came across this monster dungeon spawning more Makima zombies. I went forward and turned around the corner only to find a secret room full of chests. And inside the chests was some pretty interesting loot, like this item called the Heart of an Iron Golem. You put this on and you get +4 armor points, only if you're not already wearing armor. I then found an essential item, one that I was looking for, diamonds. You can't go to the Nether unless you have obsidian, and you can't mine obsidian unless you have a diamond pickaxe. I also crafted a wrench. Basically, you can modify the blocks, and a toolbox, basically a shulker box. It doesn't have as much storage space, but hey, extra inventory space? That's still pretty valuable. Speaking of inventory space, we could have chest upgrades. All we had to do was take a regular chest, surround it with ingots. Take this copper chest, for example. Instead of 3 rows, you get 4. If you upgrade the copper chest with iron ingots, then you craft an even better chest. You see, 1 iron chest is the equivalent of 1 double chest. I sorted my items, then I went down to the cave to gather some obsidian. I poured water over the lava, when all of a sudden I started suffering from a heat stroke. My vision got blurry, and I started taking damage. Honestly, I forgot how impactful this temperature mod could be. Thankfully, I was able to find another source of obsidian at this ruined nether portal. I even found a couple of gold blocks and a chest with some pretty decent loot. I mined most of the ruined portal, and then I went back home and began working on the roof of the workshop. At first I was a little iffy about the design, but I figured I could make it work. Once I began adding the second roof, I then realized that this was exactly what I wanted to go for. I used to believe that less was more, but sometimes you have to make an exception to that rule. Especially when it comes to Minecraft rooftops. Speaking of adding more, there was another addition I wanted to make to the roof, that being tall chimneys. You know, smokestacks, kind of like with what you see in a factory. I built a pair of the two, adding campfires on top for that smoking effect. They enhanced the roof far better than I could hope for. I then put the obsidian to work by finally building the nether portal in the upper levels of my workshop. There were a couple of things I had to do before going into the portal. You see, remember that little lesson I learned about temperature? Well, the nether is probably extremely hot, meaning that I'm gonna need some type of way to keep myself cool. But you know me, I like to procrastinate, so instead of doing what I was supposed to be doing, I just decided to add even more to the factory, like finishing up the tower. I built it a little taller, even added a roof to it. I unintentionally made this look like a medieval building, even though this is steampunk Minecraft, but you know what, let's just treat it like evolution. As I progress, the buildings are gonna start looking more and more modern. Anyways, I wanted to make some modifications to this room over here, so I started by breaking down the kiln. I made a hole in the wall, and outside of the hole, I began building a foundation for the largest smokestack that I was going to add to this building. While I was in the middle of constructing that, I was attacked by an illager riding what looked like a flying illager monster? I don't even know what I'm looking at, but this thing was annoying. The type of annoying where you try to swat a fly with a fly swatter, but you just can't hit him because it flies too fast. That type. Anyways, here's a view of the completed chimney. The workshop is definitely giving more of a factory vibe. The next task was to make ice boxes. This was the key to entering the nether without overheating. You see, when you put an ice box in a room and fill it with water, the temperature begins to drop, the water freezes. You know, it's basically a freezer. I was gonna use the boxes to freeze water skins. They're basically these pouches full of water that when you freeze them, they kind of act like ice packs. The perfect item to have when traversing the fiery hellscape that is the nether. I filled them with water and put them in the icebox, and as you can see, over the course of time, the temperature of the water begins to drop. Now I don't know what any of this Celsius business is because I'm an American and we use Fahrenheit, but I'm sure that 22 degrees is pretty cold. At least cold enough for me to survive in the nether for a few minutes. I began collecting quartz as that was the main reason I needed to be here. While I was doing that, my screen began to freeze around the corners. I guess the water skins were doing their job a little too well. I went back to the house with plenty of quartz, only to discover that my beautiful roof was on fire! My guess is that it was started by the cobblestone generator, but I don't know why it started burning now of all times. I rushed to the tower and jumped onto the roof, putting out the fire as quickly as I could. I then took the quartz I collected and combined it with redstone to make rose quartz. I took some rose quartz, sanded it down with some sandpaper, and made polished rose quartz. I combined the rose quartz with an iron sheet and crafted an electron tube. We could now craft the most important part of our machine, the deployer. We were one step closer to getting our precision mechanisms, the necessary item for our rotational speed controller. There was only one more thing I needed before moving on, and that was an automatic tree farm. I was gonna start breaking ground right behind the house, when all of a sudden I was attacked by this zombie silverfish man. He had a huge silverfish for a head, and every time I hit him, he would spawn more and more of these annoying bugs. Eventually I was able to defeat him, but he left behind a swarm of silverfish. Once I was able to clear out the infestation, I began building the tree farm. Now I'm not going to spend too much time on this because this is probably the third time you guys have seen me build one of these, so if you want to see how it's done, just go back to one of the older 100 days videos. Anyways, the tree farm was finally taking shape. The saws were attached, as were the deployers, everything was glued, and I even powered it with a water wheel. When this thing was up and running, it was only a matter of time before it could start collecting infinite amounts of wood. The only thing left to do was to set up some sort of collection system. You see, when the saws chop down a tree, the wood gets sucked into the machine and stored in a chest. But how does one get the wood out of the machine without turning the saws off? That is where the portable storage interface comes into play. All I have to do is turn on the wood farm and it does its little spin around, and when the portable storage interface comes face to face with another block just like it, they extend, they connect, and the wood is transferred into the chest. Like that, I had an automatic tree farm and a storage system to sort it all. Next, I attached a couple of large water wheels to the side of the workshop. They were basically upgraded versions of the regular water wheel, meaning that they could power more machines. The only problem is that these water wheels are way too slow. In fact, they're half the speed of a small water wheel. So we needed to speed things up. And to do so, we were gonna need our precision mechanism. It was finally time to start building the first assembly line. I would start construction on the assembly line right behind the house. But before I could do that, I had to start clearing some ground because there was a lot of dirt I needed to get out of the way. Once all of the dirt was clear and the ground was nice and flat, I began setting up the deployers. To make a precision mechanism, you need gold sheets. This is gonna take a while. You also need the small and large cogwheels as well as iron nuggets. The deployers were going to place this right onto the gold sheets. I put the item onto the conveyor belt, and it acted as the base for the precision mechanism, and I slowly watched as the deployers placed the items onto it, and by the way this is sped up, it was way slower. I ran it through the assembly line 5 times, only for it to turn into an andesite alloy. I guess there was a 20% chance of failure? I began the process all over again until I finally got my precision mechanism. As you can probably tell, I was pretty enthusiastic about getting to this point. So enthusiastic that I began jumping with joy, because now we can move on to the more interesting machines, like the rotational speed controller. But before I could make that, I needed to craft a brass casing. Similar to an andesite casing, except this time instead of right-clicking with an alloy, it needed to be right-clicked with brass. I combined the brass casing with the precision mechanism, and finally, I had my rotational speed controller. This beautiful block was going to speed up every single machine in this workshop. Not only that, but because this is an updated version of Create, they even updated the UI for the block. See how you can raise and lower the RPM? That's going to make our block slower, faster, whatever we want. I'm just happy that we had this thing. The next part was the installation. I climbed to the roof because I needed access to the bigger water wheels. I connected the controller to the water wheels and it instantly came to life. You see how much faster it's spinning now? All I had to do was connect everything else to that one spinning cog and they would all spin just as fast. With everything connected, the water wheel and the controller were definitely doing their job, but the machines could be a little faster. It looks like the max we could raise it to was 32 RPM, and you know what? That was okay. It was definitely faster than before because I added a third water wheel. We had most of our basic machines, but I was still unsatisfied with the front of the workshop. It was still pure grass, and I wanted to make a courtyard type thing, so I began clearing the dirt and preparing it for more building. One of the couple things I wanted to add was a front porch for the workshop. I wanted it to look more like a factory, so I added this loading bay platform. But looking back on it now, it resembled more of a porch. It doesn't matter. It looks great anyways. After that, I began placing down stone for the courtyard area. A nice mix of cobblestone, smooth stone, and if you stack 2 stone slabs, you even get a new texture type of stone. Now I wanted to add some light fixtures because I just didn't want any mobs spawning and ruining everything that we've built. Lanterns were the way to go. I hanged them from the front, right next to the doors. I then reinforced the wall right next to the river that we had been living above. Before, it had just been a dirt wall, so I think this looked way better. I also added some light posts on the ledge, and then after that, I used trapdoors to make a safety railing. I even added some trapdoors to the stairs that went down to the river. Yes, our new hub was finally complete. We had a house, we had a workshop, and we even had a square. I gotta say that this was a pretty productive session of SteamPunk Minecraft today. And if you agree with me, please leave a like and leave a comment down below. Tell me what your thoughts were about this video, what you want me to add, what you want me to change. I love your feedback. Thank you so much for watching. I hope you enjoyed, and I will see you in the next one. This has been Doublesal. Have a wonderful day.